being here with us. This is our 11th Wednesday webinar on topics on supply chain management. What we do is every second Wednesday of the month, we get a reputed speaker and talk about some issue which is relevant to supply chain management. We have previously talked about this China issue that we had a brief conversation about. We had also conversations on the port situations in our country. And before that, we talked about IT, visibility. The idea is to create a supply chain conversation during lunchtime and have professionals from our area, our partner companies, our friends log in and learn something about supply chain management that they previously did not and have better views. Today, we have a special guest, Allyn Trevett. Allyn is the CEO of Allyn International, who has been a very strong supporter for us. Our students have visited Allyn's International's facility. We also have speakers from Allyn come to talk at our various courses. And we have Allyn himself come and talk to us about this idea of vision-driven logistics organization. Before I hand over the webinar to Allyn, just a note, what inspired me to create this webinar is whenever I talk to logistics people, there is always this discussion about a customer issue that flared up, a firefighting, overnight shipment, something that was created to somehow solve the problem. When I talk to people at Allyn, I do hear that conversation, but there is also some larger picture that is conveyed. Everybody I talk to talks to me about larger picture, something that they do differently, which I find very different. And that was what started the conversation, that what does Allyn do differently? How is Allyn able to create this? So I want to hand over the conversation to Allyn. But before that, something specific, Allyn. Tell us about yourself, and maybe you could start with something that you told me about your failed vision in 1992. Which probably propelled you towards the state that you are currently in. So I hand it over to you, Allyn.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's time today. Yeah, it was kind of a major failure from the first, from year 3 on. I had a partner that started the business with me, and we incorporated on February 14th, 1992. So we've been in business for a little over 30 years. And the partner and I both had a significant amount of people responsibility, managerial responsibility in a big company. And one of the things that we decided to do is we didn't want to continue to have that much day-to-day responsibility for people and all the organizational trappings that go with that. So our ideal next job was to create a small consulting organization of no more than 10 people. Where we could make a lot of money, take a lot of time off, and still bring a lot of value to customers. So within 3 or 4 years, we pretty much failed on most of those 3 or 4 accounts, and the only one that we didn't make a lot of money initially. We did bring a lot of value to clients. We ended up within a very short period of time with more than 10 employees, which certainly wasn't the objective at that time. So we grew much more substantially than we had really wanted to in terms of our game plan. But sometimes life takes you down roads that you sometimes don't anticipate. But I think that some of our success is rooted in what our goals were, and I'll try to take you through really 3 phases in terms of our agenda. And a brief overview of our organization, our mission and values and business owners. And I think that'll hopefully kind of address the visionary piece of it. And I want to qualify that, and I appreciate the positive comments in terms of that But I can tell you that every client that we do business with, at the end of the review, say, tell me more, tell me what everybody else is doing, help me with a strategy going forward, and you haven't told me enough. So I think we're doing a pretty good job, but we still push our employees, our managers, and because our customers are pushing us for a more strategic, where do we go and what's the next step, as opposed to on a transaction basis. And some of that is because a good portion of the clients that we have, they have a tremendous amount of transactions, and while we, like everybody else at the end of the day, are just physically exhausted because of the number of transactions we have to deal with, especially today with how complex they are. The last year, they still really push us hard in terms of, where's the world going? Give me some help and guidance in terms of where I should go and laying my strategy out. So we'll go from here to a brief overview of Allyn International, and I'm going to try to stay on target. You just got to schedule in, and I've also got some commitments right after 2 o'clock. So I kind of told you what the Allyn vision was in 1992, and we failed, in terms of what our objectives were. And my partner was Julie Willard. Unfortunately, she passed a few years ago. And other than that, she would probably be giving this presentation today because she's much more adept at it than I am. We are currently located in 23 different countries, close to 45 different locations. I think right now we're pretty close to 450 employees, providing logistics compliance, a variety of different supply chain activities. And as I'll talk about, a lot of them are tailored, some tax and trade compliance solutions. I've got to get rid of this box here. There. I can tell you real briefly that my background is in tax. From tax, I get into trade compliance because trade, the tariff is the oldest tax in the United States. And from trade compliance, we got into logistics. Although logistics specifically comprises probably 85% of our business. We're privately owned, family owned. We have had very long retention rates with our clients. There's some of our major clients we've had for 20 to 28 years. So some of our biggest clients. So we'll typically, if we pick up a client, we'll typically keep them for a very long period of time. We are one of the first and leading fourth-party logistics providers. We manage over $4 billion in freight. And this kind of goes hand in hand with a discussion that we started off with in terms of how do we be strategic and vision. I can tell you that if you went back to the late 1990s, we were basically doing a tremendous amount of sourcing, especially for the General Electric company at that point in time. And they had best-in-class rates, but very often they didn't use them. So they, in collaboration with us, created really one of the first fourth-party logistics providers. That they worked with us on the strategy, and we implemented it on a global basis. And they did that so that they could tie their different individual plants together as they went through consolidation, purchasing, significant growth with respect to their businesses, so that they could come up with common practices and common platform, and to use some of the really good tools that they had, whether it be best-in-class rates or rating tools, that type of thing, that they weren't on an individual plant-by-plant basis. So we were actually, if you look back in the 1990s, that's the year that the 4PL concept was coined, and it was really the same year that we started it. If you look in the next slide, you'll see our physical locations, or at least a significant amount of them on a countrywide basis. Headquartered here in Fort Myers.
I know I'm from Ocala, but you butchered it.
Europe, we're headquartered in Prague in the Czech Republic, Middle East in Dubai, and in Asia, both in Shanghai and in Australia. Here you can see some of the services we offer, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but the 4PL Logistics, which is global freight management, control tower, carrier management, and this probably captures 60% of our gross revenue. Consulting, technology, we've developed our own software in terms of both trade compliance and logistics software, and we've been working on that for 20 plus years. So we've got a huge investment in that. And then trade compliance. With respect to trade compliance, it's at a higher level. It's not doing day-to-day brokerage work. It's doing the classification, setting up the brokers, trying to monitor that transactions flow smoothly, that the different supply chains that have to cross borders do so timely and effectively. As we continued to grow, we recognized that a company, we needed to set up an infrastructure, some guidelines, so that we could grow consistently on a global basis. And I can tell you it's somewhat difficult because when you're operating out of 20 different countries, the paradigms are different. People think differently. And so one of the things that we thought was incumbent, and we brought about 10 different senior managers together for 3 days and talked about what are some of the most important things as an organization we have to do. Because we felt like if we laid these parameters out, no matter what venture we went into, including the ones that we were currently in, which would be predominantly the supply chain, trade compliance work, as we grew those businesses, if we developed the right mission and the right values, number one, those would be sustainable over time. And number two, they would be applicable on a global basis. So we came up with a mission statement, and I think that this is particularly important with respect to trying to set up a vision in terms of what we wanted to do going forward that was broad enough so that it would apply to everybody, but specific enough so that there was some focus. And that's providing exceptional professional services for the global marketplace, enabling our customers to succeed by focusing on their core business. So I can tell you that we start every staff meeting looking at our mission statement. We typically we'll start every business review with our clients with that. And then we talk about our most important asset, which is our people, inspiring them to achieve their full potential. So we've had this mission statement since 2005. So we're going on 17 years, I guess, now of that, and haven't wavered from that at all. And each employee should be very aware of that, and I think they are. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we apply that to the different businesses with some practical applications. Each customer that we have is unique with respect to their needs, and we tailor our services based upon their strategy and their needs. I can tell you, first of all, that virtually all of our business comes from referral. It's very, very seldom that we get it through an internet search. And if we do, at the end of the day, we usually obtain the work because of strong referrals that we've got from clients that we're either currently working with or have previously worked with. And we don't have a specific checklist of services we offer. We have a generic high levels of service. So we'll sit down with each client and say, what do you really, where's your business? What kind of things do you think you need? And then we'll come back and say, well, we think this is what you need. And it's not really a consultant's role. It's usually a longer term, more strategic role. So we'll sit with them short term on a strategic role basis, but then long term, try to work out something where as partners we can work together on some sort of a long-term relationship. So to the right, you can see a sample statement of work. So we'll have this statement of work for virtually all the clients. Now, this particular statement of work that we pulled out of this contract, it probably went for 5 to 10 pages, but you can see that there's all sorts of different various functions there within the statement of work that we perform for this specific customer. And as I said, if you were to look at the whole thing, it's probably gone on 5 to 10. And most of these have a number of specific metrics that are associated with them. One of the other things that we did when we sat down in 2005 is laid out where we wanted our vision to be. I can tell you that back in 2015, every 5 years, we've taken a look back at, where do we want to be with respect to within the industry, and where do we want to be in terms of revenue growth. Back in 2015, I think we were around $18-20 million in sales. We said we're going to set a revenue target of 35 million. I think we exceeded that in 2020, hitting roughly 37 million, which is our gross sales for 2020 on a consolidated group basis. And we said we want to be a premier boutique service provider for supply chain, trade compliance, and tax services. For a number of reasons, I think we've achieved that, including the fact that, as I said, most of our work comes from referrals. We maintain clients over a long haul. A lot of the feedback that we got from customer surveys, net promoter scores, day-to-day input with respect to comments that we collect indicate that we're providing the type of service that you would expect out of a boutique service provider. And we had an 18-month strategy. We will align our organization structure and talent to increase productivity, which we did, and with significant breakthroughs in sales. I'll tell you one of the things that and this was back in 2015, we did this. And so I kind of doing a look back, we have another strategy that takes us from 2020 to 2025 with a significant bump up in sales. And we're also trying to align with the new reality in terms of what we see in the marketplace and what we see our customers want. We've got a long-term vision, but medium-term strategies, and we try not to waver from those every month or every 3 months, depending upon whatever the flavor of the day is. We do need to adjust, and we need to be current, and we certainly recognize that. Back in 2005, one of the things that we thought was very, very important as an organization is that we set up values. We set 8 values. We've used the same values year after year, staff meeting after staff meeting. It's brought up every staff meeting. And our 8 values include integrity, which is the foundation of our organization. Trust and dependability is really key to the whole organization. Excellence. Business referrals represent, as I said, over 95% of our new clients. You can see a comment that we got from one of our customers to the right there with respect to our work in terms of trying to move critical healthcare equipment around. And I can tell you that business has been terribly vibrant over the last 2 years for, unfortunately, reasons that none of us care about. We've tried to, and not only tried to, but I think succeeded significantly in contributing to our local communities. And that's irrespective of whether it's been in Fort Myers or Prague. To the right, you see a picture of where we're collecting money or actually collecting canned food that's going to the homeless. We do that once a year, and do the same thing, as I said, on a global basis. I can tell you that they raise several thousands of dollars through corporate activities and through individual activities in Prague to support the current crisis in Ukraine with respect to the social needs and well-being. We do a number of things to try to ensure that our employees are healthy from a mental perspective and a physical perspective. Creativity. The 4PL business led us down this path to create a best-in-class logistics software. We call it the Allyn Logistics application. I'm not sure how creative that is, but I do believe it's best in class. It competes with Oracle's products. It competes with SAP, and very often competes very favorably. So right now, one of the things that we've done from a creative perspective is we use the software internally. historically, and over the last 2 years, we've sold it externally, and it's really worked out pretty well. Enjoyment, we try to make sure that people that are going to want to work at Allyn International have other reasons to work here besides just the payroll. We know that they certainly work here for a payroll, but we also want us to be the employer of choice for other reasons than just a paycheck. Prosperity, we recognize that we have to be in the black. We have been in the black every year, as I said, except for the first couple of years that we were in business. I think the first 2 or 3 years we were in the red. And we use a lot of the funds pouring it back into strategic programs, people, and I could give you numerous examples of that. And then focused growth. One of the things that we've done on the people side of things, and then on the operations side, is invested heavily in technical training. And that's because typically the people that we've gotten out of, whether it be FGCU, Ohio State, Tennessee, which both have renowned supply chain schools, none of them come to us with really the skill sets that we need on a day-to-day basis to fulfill our customer objectives. In general, it just isn't taught. And in addition to that, as I mentioned, each one of our clients is very specific in terms of what they want and the way they've arranged their supply chains. So we've developed a number of, I think, very good technical logistics courses that has made us best in class in terms of that. And as of 2 years ago, we started selling the software, and we've had several major sales. So in terms of focus, growth, and creativity, I think it's a good example of something that we've done is sold some of the stuff that we did internally, externally. It did 2 things for me. Number one, it helped underwrite our training budget. And then the other thing, proved to us that what we do is first class with respect to some of the programs we've got internally. One of the things that we've tried to set up and I think is particularly valuable is setting up business owners. One of the reasons I left the position I had in 1992 is that I wanted more of a sense of entrepreneurship that you get in a smaller company. And we wanted to try to share that opportunity with really almost every employee to the extent it's possible. So I'm going to start by the bottom takeaway. Allyn's organized by customer, not by function. And we've done that since day one, since 1992, because our philosophy always is that at the end of the day, there's we're going to do a better job if we're a customer focused versus functional. We do realize that there's a certain amount of functional benefits that we receive, and perhaps even the customer receives, based upon economies of scale in terms of certain functions. And what we try to do with those functions is share best practices, implement common platforms. But every team that we have that supports a major client, and sometimes there may be a team of 2 people and they support six different clients, or there may be a team of 40 people and they support 1 client, irrespective of what they are. They know what client they support. There's a direct one-to-one ownership with that client. So if we grow that client, there's a good reason for it. If we lose that client, there's a good reason for it. And there's accountability with respect to that. So we have a global account manager for every client, and that global account manager focused is that client. So we don't have a global account manager that's managing 50 different clients. On a day-to-day basis, that global account manager is involved in all the intricacies of that client, and they either make it or they break it. And that includes making sure we've got a current statement of work, daily execution, strategy for customer excellence and value creation, client profit and loss statements, personnel, hiring, training, oversight, and all the other idiosyncrasies that come with that. So I think that's really been key. So one of the things I feel really good about is I think we've done a really good job of growing individuals, and so that they look at the broader picture. Because when they go through a review with a client, certainly they're going to go through the data with them. The client expects the analysis, and they also expect suggestions coming back in terms of strategy. So I want to go through some of the tools we have, and I've already alluded to this one. Every client we have, we intentionally try to schedule a quarterly business review. And you can, and those quarterly business reviews typically will be anywhere from an hour to 3 or 4 hours. They will go through all the metrics with respect to the historical shipments over the last 3 months or the past year. They'll reflect on what the statement of work had relative to the work that we did. They'll go through the challenges that occurred over the last month to 2 months, and challenges that are foreseen in the future. And then the client expectation and my expectation is the manager that's going through this will come up with viable options in terms of mitigating the challenges or taking advantage of an opportunity. We also do customer surveys. The customer surveys are done once a year. Do I have an example? Yeah, I've got an example of a customer survey. And the customer surveys are typically 30 minutes to an hour for the customer to complete. At the end of the day, probably the key thing that we look at is the Net Promoter Score. In terms of overall how we did, I would say it's the individual comments that we probably put the most time into looking at in terms of specific items that a client comes back to us in terms of what can you do to improve. We have been religious with respect to these customer surveys for the past 5 years, and I would say done them for the last 10 years. But for the past 5 years, we have been very, very adamant in terms of going through them. A lot of involvement with respect to the different teams, administering them, making sure that it's well understood, and that the data that comes back from us is something that we can do something with. And then the other thing that we try to do too is create internal scorecards. We haven't only tried to do it, we're doing it. But if you look at the scorecard here that we've got to the right, and this is a sample one, but each of our different business owners have one. And I think we've got probably over 20 different business owners within a company that's got 450 people. So as I say, we really get it down to pretty much an individual basis. So we talk about top line and profitability. We talk about what are you doing to develop your business? Customer service and training. What are you doing to ensure that yourself is trained, your employees are trained? What are you doing from an administrative perspective to make sure that you're actively participating in all the company integrity courses, legal requirements, and that from a commercial perspective, we're performing to the extent that our corporation expects and the clients expect. These data we collect over the last quarter, and then the expectation is that every team reports out on this on a group basis every 3 months. And so it's a little competitive, but I would hopefully even more competitive individually, because you want to get a little bit better every quarter than you were the quarter before. I can tell you that we did a review with this and probably 40 different people yesterday, and kind of went through group by group by group. And one of the things that astounded me yesterday when I sat back and thought about it last evening was the fact that virtually every one of the reviews that took place, the manager that had the review came back with recommendations to his peers in terms of said, this works for me, and I'm going to do, and I would recommend you try this. This doesn't work, and I'm glad you mentioned this, and I'm going to try this. So I think that the format's beneficial, and it's rewarding from my perspective in terms of seeing where we're doing. But I think even more important, it's rewarding to the individual managers, because they can see that their work is recognized, and that they've got an active, dynamic scorecard where they're getting visibility on a corporate-wide basis. And they get that visibility both from a customer perspective and individually. Try to stay on time, and I think that I had roughly half an hour, and I'm 3 minutes past. So if that's, can you get me the boxes back here that give me the pictures? Give me 1 second, folks. Yeah, so I think we're at the question period. I'm trying to get, all right.
Thank you, Allyn. That was a very nice presentation telling us about a very formal, structured way. And one thing I can definitely see is that Allyn International has not stayed limited to the logistics part, but has expanded into technology, education, and many different aligned areas to create a very strong and balanced organization. Thank you for your presentation. Anybody has any questions to start with?
Hi, Allyn. I have one. Actually, I have several, but I'm going to limit my time here. Thank you for the presentation. Very, very nice. And then I know Allyn has been very successful. You can see that. But if you had to start all over again, would you do anything different?
Would I do anything different? Sure, on a transactional basis, there would be a number of things I would do different. But in general, no. I mean, I think that we've achieved a lot of the objectives that we wanted. Number one, I think we really have an excellent reputation with a lot of customers, and I can vouch for that based upon the customer surveys and the retention rate we've got. Number two, one of the other major sources of new customers that we get are from former employees that have left us and gone somewhere else. So I think we've done a really good job of growing individuals, so that, well, certainly one of our objectives has been to be financially successful. There's no way that I think that from day one or even 30 years later, our objectives have been much broader than that in terms of leaving a positive impact from a customer perspective, an employee perspective, a community perspective. And so I think in terms of all those areas, we certainly could have done better. And there's a few things that I would have done better. And hopefully every day we're trying to improve upon that. But I think overall we've met the objectives. And it's a good question. I was up speaking at Cortland College up in New York, and somebody asked me the same question. So I should have been more prepared for it.
So I'm tagging along. Just one question. Sorry, folks. So thank you so much for hosting our student club in supply chain management. They visited Allyn International a few weeks ago. They came out very impressed. And so on that, thank you. And what kind of characteristics would you looking for? Are you looking for a new employee, for example, or your students come from supply chain management course?
Morgan, your voice is really crackling. It's breaking up. I struggle.
So Professor Kirsch was asking this question that when you get new people, what do you look for in the new people that you employ, given that this is the structure that your organization has?
Yeah, I would say number one, typically we are getting college educated folks. I can tell you that. But it's really more with the broad-based skills. I can tell you, and it varies a little bit too, depending upon where they're working. I can tell you that for our employees that are working in Europe, language skills are absolutely critical because very often they're dealing in a variety of different countries and they need to be fluent in it. Certainly a business degree, international business degree, knowledge of commercial relationships. I mean, we deal with letters of credit. So it's not strictly just trucks and warehouses. It's inventory values, making sure that if there's a sales commitment, that we're assisting the business and trying to get out the door, whatever that sales commitment is. So it's really broader than just booking a truck and making sure you got a bill of lading. So I would say the broad skills are what we're looking, the broad business skills, what we're looking at, with the basic skills, certainly with strong communications, analytics is really important, and the ability to communicate and rational business decisions. So, you know, the technical piece, we have successfully trained a lot of people internally, and I think we can continue to do that. I'm sure of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Trevett, this is Pete Persano. Thanks so much for your time and your talk today. Very enlightening. I was curious if you could share with us, whom do you see as your competition and why?
I can tell you that we don't have head-to-head competition like some other people do. Very often, a company will come to us and say, can you do this for us? And so from a competitive perspective, often it's a decision of, do they want to do it internally or do they want to do it externally? And so there's often a discussion of full cost versus variable cost, and then the value that we can bring in terms of our knowledge and our expertise. So I'm not sure I want to say it's competition, but the rationalization of doing it internally versus externally is very often something that comes up. We do compete with some of the freight forwarders with respect to some of the supply chain activities, but they also act as our customers very often, because as a 4PL, very often we're laid over them in terms of management. So we'll also compete with some of the big CPA firms in some of the other consulting operations. So it's a variety of different folks. I would say that for the big forwarders, the 4PL activity is a periphery activity. For some of the larger CPA firms, they compete with us in terms of trade compliance, but again, it's probably a smaller segment of their business. So there's no one on a one-to-one basis that's got exactly the same services that we do, and it's somewhat unique from that perspective, which I guess it can be good and can be bad depending upon how you look at it.
Thank you. You know, that's kind of what I thought, and maybe it's time to coin a new term. You're sort of like a 7PL in terms of the array of services that you offer. You're selling software, you're providing the services, the CPA consultancy, the transportation, the trade. I mean, it's quite impressive. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Allyn, I have a question. How do you divide your time between the transactional, optimizing the transactional, and looking at the future? How do you divide your time between these two activities?
Well, I can tell you that the senior management staff has a meeting once a week, or I would say that 80% of our time talks about strategy and where we're going to go. I can tell you we're going to meet tomorrow morning for an hour or two and discuss our footprint and where we want to be. And there's pluses and minuses in terms of different locations versus cost versus some of the other positives. So we may spend 5 or 10 minutes talking about the most recent transaction type thing that'll come up, but I would say that at least once a week. So I would say probably 20% of the time, 30% of the time is certainly strategic, at least on a mid to high level management, and 60 to 70% is on the day-to-day routine stuff, which if you're like me, I still spend a fair amount of time writing checks and paying bills and the other basic stuff you have to do to get from 8 to 5 or 8 to 8. So, you know, so I would say anywhere 20 to 30%.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Now I can tell you that yesterday, I mean, we had we spent 3 hours with all our managers, and we went through metrics. But part of the metrics was, you know, now what do you do? Tell me what the data means. So, because if you don't do something with the data, then it's collecting data for nothing. So.
So just taking along that question, so what do you think are the opportunities now with this new world with COVID and wars, lockdowns, and global inflation? You share with us some opportunities for LSPs, logistics service providers.
Piyush, can you rephrase that again? I'm struggling to.
I could not get that question, Lee. I could not get that question.
If you could share with us some of the opportunities that you foresee for the near term for logistics in this world of lockdowns and COVID and wars.
Yeah. So Professor Kirsch is asking a question on your views on the current challenges, given that we had COVID, the wars, and shortages and all these situations. So how do you think logistics and how does it look the next year looks to you?
I don't know. At this point in time, is every month we've been thrown with something different. I can tell you that what's happened in China with lockdowns, it's been a real struggle for us. Virtually all the businesses we have, a significant amount of their supply chains are tied up in China, although I can tell you they're re-looking at that on an active basis. With that said, we have tried to support them as much as we can in terms of getting stuff out of Asia, and it's been a real struggle because we've had to move to non-traditional ports, airports, seaports, and using other non-traditional things. I can tell you right now, we have supported the oil and gas industry, including we were ready to sign a major contract in Russia up until 2 days before the invasion of Ukraine. And I can tell you right now, at least one of the customers is looking more at the Caspian Sea area. We are also seeing an enormous amount of inflation. And I mean, one of the things we're struggling with is freight rates, as everybody else is, you know, and how to manage those both on a short-term basis and strategically long-term. Certainly, you know, your ability to move stuff today is really based upon a lot of the strategic alliances that you've developed or we've developed over a number of years. I think without those, it would be a disaster right now, really a disaster. So it almost, I mean, we were talking about it the other day, it's almost like every month we're going from crisis to crisis anymore. So I think the question is have crisis management become the new norm? So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah, hi, Allyn. Good evening from India.
Yeah.
So I just would like to know about the highlights on logistics KPI that you know the company is following.
Can you rephrase the question?
Can you please describe the logistics KPI that the company is following currently? Can you put some highlights on this?
Sure. I mean, I can tell you that in terms of KPIs, we have all the typical cost metrics, all the typical pickup and delivery metrics, cost per ton mile. We actively look at freight claims. With respect to a lot of the larger companies we have, they're using us as a 4PL to help manage their vendors into their factory, material ship direct. So we'll provide metrics on that, including the quality of the data we get from those vendors. So I think those would probably be the major ones, and then there'll be numerous cuts of those, you know, with respect to on-time delivery and cost. So just about any way you can think of cutting it, you know, we cut it. I can tell you that, you know, one of the things that we also try to take a look at while we typically will have standard rate charts, certainly in the last 6 months, it's been difficult to anybody to get anything to move under those. So typically, we're also taking a really close eye now at variances and what can we do to get back to some of the baselines that we've established with respect to long-term customer client relations with our carrier base. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, Ellen. I had a question. Thank you
Sure.
so much for your presentation. I was wondering, and from being such a long-standing company in the relationships and stuff, how does the company continue to be like profitable with like all these cost increases and all this high risk management that you guys have to do on a month-to-month basis? Like, how are the strategies aligning, and what are some of the solutions you guys been trying to tackle or come up with?
Well, we're certainly entering, I wouldn't say it's a new era. I remember the 1970s, and I remember significant inflation back then. So I would say we're trying to stay very cognizant of where our costs are and stay current with our clients. And there's certainly a trade-off. And one of the things I guess I would tell you that we're trying to make sure that our clients are aware of what the trade-offs are with respect to what we may have to pay for a premium to meet some of the delivery requirements. In some cases, particularly some of the big construction projects, there's a really significant liquidated damages. So while they may end up paying a 30% premium on a per kilo basis, it may be well worth it for them to ensure that it gets delivered based upon some sort of a liquidated damage clause or some other client clause. So I think at this point in time, really the key is visibility in terms of what the options are. So I think there's really two things. Number one, trying to make sure that with respect to our organization, we're trying to be as efficient as possible, maintain a reasonable base with our costs, recognize that in general they're going up, and we expect that our labor costs, not expect, we know that they're going up, and more than they have traditionally over the last 10 years. And then trying to make sure that we can adequately state that case to our customers. But with respect to the supply chain costs, whether it be warehousing, demurrage, or you name it, trying to make sure that we hold carriers accountable to the extent we can hold them accountable, and make sure that we provide visibility to what the different variables are as a 4PL to our clients that ultimately have responsibility for the freight cost. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. A separate question I had is how are you guys continuing to attract talent, especially with like Southwest Florida being such a high rising, you know, we don't have rent caps and everything's been increasing so much in our area, particularly to attract the talent to, you know, sign up with Allyn these days? Because I know I caught an article with Scotland that they are having problems recruiting people as well.
Well, I think everybody, first of all, I don't think it's unique to Fort Myers. Fort Myers may be worse than other locations, but I can tell you that our EMEA headquarters in Prague, the unemployment rate in the Czech Republic is 2.2%, which I think is lower than it is in Fort Myers. And we have a similar problem in Shanghai. So in all three of our major locations, we have that problem. I can tell you that we are looking at other locations to help balance that situation, although I don't think that there's any place that's going to just take care of that problem totally. I mean, we've continued to build our base up in Greenville, South Carolina, where prices are going up, but a little bit more modestly. And we're also looking at a second location in Asia for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're pretty much built out at our current office there, and second, we're struggling to find people there. And we also don't want to be only in China with respect to our ability to serve Asia. And we're also looking at another location in Europe. So we're trying to look at, one of the things we're actively looking at is our footprint. I would say though that we've been relatively successful in Fort Myers in recruiting. So I guess I'd have to have my HR team talk to that, and but I think they've been relatively relatively successful, very successful, to be honest with you. To my knowledge, there's very few open positions that we have. So I would assume that we're finding people that somehow got at least housing solved short term, although I certainly recognize the costs have gone up tremendously here, and the cost of living is not what it was 20 or 30 years ago. So it's a struggle, and given that the whole area is so built out, I'm concerned about it, to be honest with you. So because we and to be honest with you, we've got to be cost effective. We can't go passing on 10, 15, 20 or 30% cost increases to our clients. It's a business. That's a business model that won't work. That we know. So I guess the other thing we're trying to do too is, to the extent we can mechanize, provide productivity, consolidation, and therefore a little bit higher salaries and maintain the cost levels with our clients. We're pushing that very hard in terms of investment. Higher value work here. So that's why your work in the university is really important in terms of laying that framework out. So
thank you. We are close to finishing time. Any last questions? Nihar, go ahead. Nihar, you're muted.
Thank you, Piyush. Thank you, Allyn. It was a pretty insightful presentation. For me, seeing a process-oriented approach to handling logistics was an eye-opener. I think that's where Piyush was coming from right at the beginning of the session. I had a quick question. So when it comes to a process-oriented approach to logistics, how do you handle resilience? I understand that you're meeting on a regular basis, you're looking at all the options in a timely manner. But beyond that, do you have a 3-month window which you look at for potential uncertainties, which may affect your clients? How does that work? Thank you again.
Yeah, it's a good question. And the answer is absolutely, we do. I can tell you that just prior to walking up here, I met one of my coworkers down in the lunchroom, and he was talking about how he was supporting getting parts to a plane that was out of commission up in Canada. So part of the metrics that we have with our clients is guidelines in terms of both when we have to act on things and certain triggers that go off if we don't act on those. So if you look at it from that perspective, there's a number of triggers built into the processes, built into the logistics systems, where red flags go off if certain things don't happen. And those red flags are developed on a business by business basis. And those processes are documented on a business by business basis. For a plane on the ground, that's a critical item. And we've got, last week I was doing a review for folks that manufacture wind turbines, and they've got 2-hour window for certain requests, 4-hour window for other requests, and 48-hour window for other requests. And obviously what you want is that a process that's dynamic, where it's achievable, but it also provides the proper controls. And I'll tell you that in addition to that, one of the things that we set our footprint up to in terms of resilience, so whether we get hit with a hurricane here or they get hit with COVID in China, we have different parts of the organization that routinely can pick up the slack. I can tell you that in China we had I think 4 or 5 people that came down with COVID and weren't able to work because they got sent off to the COVID center. And we had some of our folks in India that picked it up. And when we went through hurricanes in Fort Myers, we had folks in Schenectady, New York, Greenville, and Prague that assisted us. So from that perspective and the resilience, and we think about that daily, because we know that if we're down for 3 or 4 days, something doesn't happen for 3 or 4 days, a lot of the clients will move on as expediters, as seen over the debacle that they had a couple months ago.
Mhm.
Many of their clients haven't fully moved back to them or may not move back at all. So,
Yeah. Thank you so much.
yep. Okay.
Thank you, Alan. Any further questions? We have a minute left. All right, so then we get to end this session on time. Thank you very much, Alan, for your time and your views on the specifics at Allyn International and how you managed to create the vision-oriented organization. So this is, thank you for our regular participants of the webinar. This is part of the conversation that we create on supply chain management here at the Center for Supply Chain Excellence at FGCU. Our future sessions, we will give you intimations is on how to convince top management for supply chain developments, how to communicate with top management, which we believe is a very important topic for supply chain. And after that, we have a Navy SEAL who's going to talk to us about a collision that happened off the coast of Japan, a Navy frigate and a commercial ship. And what can we learn in supply chains from that collision? So we do try to keep getting interesting people. Share us your feedback on what we can do to improve this. And we hope that you can put 1 p.m. to 1 or 2 p.m. every second Wednesday as a booked slot on your calendars. And I hope to see you again. We will not have a session next week or next month because it's summer, and we will catch up again after that. Thank you again. Thank you very much, Alan, for your time. And I look forward to seeing all of you in the second month from today.
Thank
I know.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Alan.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.